stop. Before you scroll past, before you tell yourself, I've heard this before, I need you to sit with one uncomfortable question for just 3 seconds. When was the last time you walked into a room and owned it? Not performed, not pretended, not white-knuckled your way through small talk with your heart hammering in your chest. I mean, actually owned it. If you had to pause to remember, this is for you. Because here's what nobody tells you about confidence. The version they sell you in self-help books, in motivational reels, in those glossy believe in yourself posters, is a beautiful, carefully packaged lie. And that lie is quietly costing you opportunities, relationships, and the life you know you're capable of living. Real confidence, dangerous confidence, doesn't look anything like what you've been shown. By the time you finish this, you won't just think differently about confidence. You'll realize that everything you've been doing to build it has been working against you, and more importantly, you'll have a step-by-step psychological system to rebuild it from scratch, the right way, permanently. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The confidence myth that's been holding you hostage. Let's get one thing straight right now. Confidence is not a feeling. I know that sounds backwards. You've spent years chasing that feeling, that warm, settled, I've got this sensation in your chest. You've tried affirmations in the mirror. You've watched motivational videos at 2 a.m. You've read books that told you to stand tall, speak boldly, believe in your worth. And every single time it worked for about 48 hours. Then life happened. Your boss raised an eyebrow at your idea. Someone didn't text back. You stumbled over your words in a meeting, and just like that, the feeling evaporated, and you were back to square one, feeling like confidence was something other people were simply born with. Here's what I want you to understand, clearly and permanently. That model of confidence is broken, not slightly flawed, completely, fundamentally broken at the foundation. Real confidence, the kind that doesn't collapse when someone challenges you, the kind that stays with you at 3 a.m. when everything feels uncertain, the kind that walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere without saying a single word, isn't built on feelings. It's built on knowing. Knowing that you have the psychological tools to handle what's in front of you. Knowing that your worth isn't tied to anyone's reaction. Knowing that you've faced difficult things before and you came out the other side. That's not a feeling. That's a fact about who you are. And facts don't disappear when someone doesn't applaud you. The 4 lies you've been fed. Before we build anything real, we need to clear the rubble. Because some of what you've been taught about confidence isn't just ineffective, it's actively making things worse. Let's look at each lie and more. Importantly, why it works against you. Lie number 1, confidence comes from positive thinking. This is perhaps the most widespread piece of psychological junk food ever served to a well-meaning person. The idea that you can think your way into confidence, repeat enough affirmations, visualize enough success, tell yourself you're enough often enough, has been packaged and sold with tremendous sincerity. But here's what actually happens in your brain when you try it. Your subconscious mind is not a cheerleader. It's an accountant. It keeps detailed, meticulous records of your actual experiences. The times you tried something and it went well, the times you avoided something because it scared you, the times you told yourself you could do something and then didn't follow through. It doesn't care about your affirmations. It cares about your evidence. So when you stand in front of the mirror and say, I am confident, I am capable, I am worthy, And your internal record shows a history of self-doubt and avoidance. Your subconscious doesn't nod along. It files a contradiction, and that contradiction creates a low-level internal static, a psychological friction that makes you feel less stable, not more. You're not building confidence. You're arguing with yourself, and you're losing. Real confidence comes from evidence, from a growing track record of doing hard things and surviving, from proving to your own nervous system repeatedly that you can handle pressure, uncertainty, and imperfection. Lie number 2. Truly confident people don't feel afraid. This one is particularly damaging because it sets an impossible standard and then punishes you for being human. Here's the truth. Every person you've ever looked at and thought, they just have it naturally. They feel fear. They feel uncertainty. They feel that tight, uncomfortable twist in the stomach before a big conversation, a major decision, a moment where the outcome actually matters. The difference, the only difference, is that they don't wait for the fear to leave before they act. When you believe confident people don't feel scared, you create an invisible threshold in your mind. I'll do it when I'm ready. I'll speak up when I feel less nervous. I'll go for it when I stop feeling like this. But that threshold keeps moving because the fear doesn't disappear before action. It disappears through action. Waiting to feel ready is the surest way to never be ready. Lie number 3, confidence means believing in yourself. I want you to sit with this one for a moment because it sounds so right that it almost gets a pass. Believing in yourself, as a concept, asks you to already be the person you're trying to become. It asks you to have certainty about abilities you haven't developed yet. It asks you to trust an outcome you can't yet guarantee. That's not confidence. That's a pressure cooker. Real confidence isn't about believing you'll succeed. It's about trusting that no matter what happens, you'll figure it out, you'll adapt, you'll learn, you'll get back up. The shift from, I believe I can do this, to, I trust myself to handle whatever happens, might sound subtle, but psychologically, it changes everything. One demands a performance. The other gives you permission to be human. Lie number 4, fake it till you make it. Let me be direct with you. This advice has probably done more damage to people's long-term confidence than almost anything else. When you're performing confidence, you don't feel you're not building anything. You're maintaining a performance. And performing is exhausting. It requires constant monitoring. Am I coming across right? Can they tell? Is the mask slipping? Which pulls your attention away from actually connecting, actually thinking clearly, actually showing up fully in the moment. And the worst part? Other people can sense it, not always consciously, but something feels slightly off, slightly forced, like a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Real confidence is unconscious. It's what happens when you stop thinking about confidence and just focus on what's actually happening in front of you. These 4 lies share a common flaw. They all try to manage the symptom, the feeling of insecurity, rather than address the source. And as long as you're managing symptoms, you'll be back to the pharmacy every few weeks for another dose. It's time to treat the root. Chapter 2. What's actually happening in your brain. To build something that lasts, you need to understand the machinery underneath. Confidence isn't a personality trait that floats somewhere in your character. It's a neurological process, specific, predictable, and most importantly, trainable. Once you understand how it works, you stop hoping for confidence and start engineering it. Your brain runs on two primary operating systems that directly determine how confident you feel in any given moment. The first is your limbic system, ancient, fast, emotionally driven. Its job, evolutionarily speaking, was to keep you alive by scanning for threats and triggering responses before your conscious mind could even form a thought. It doesn't reason, it reacts. The second is your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for strategic thinking, clear communication, creative problem solving, and nuanced decision making. The part that makes you distinctly human. Here's what happens in a situation where you lack confidence. Your limbic system perceives a threat, a difficult conversation, a high-stakes presentation, a social situation where you feel uncertain, and it floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Blood diverts. Your body prepares for fight or flight, and your prefrontal cortex, the part you need to think clearly and perform well, gets partially shut down. In that moment, you're not working with your full brain. You're working with your survival brain. And here's the part that should genuinely change how you think about your own anxiety. Your limbic system cannot distinguish between a genuine threat and an imagined one. It treats a tense conversation with your manager the same way it would treat a physical confrontation. Same hormones, same shutdown, same tunnel vision. That's not weakness. That's ancient wiring running in a modern world. Dangerous confidence happens when you've trained your brain, through repeated experience, to recognize that most social and professional challenges are not actually threats. When your limbic system stays calm, your prefrontal cortex stays online. And when it stays online, you have access to the full range of your intelligence, creativity, and communication ability. You don't perform despite pressure, you perform through it. The science of rewiring. The most important concept for building lasting confidence is neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to physically rewire itself based on your experiences. Every time you face something difficult and come through it, your brain builds new neural pathways that categorize that type of situation as manageable. Every time you avoid something difficult, your brain strengthens the pathways that categorize it as dangerous. You are, quite literally, voting for your own confidence or insecurity with every choice you make. This is why exposure therapy works so remarkably well for anxiety and phobias. Repeated, controlled exposure to a feared situation teaches the brain, not intellectually, but neurologically, that the threat isn't real. The fear response weakens. Eventually, it fades. The same principle governs confidence. But here's where most people go wrong. They think they need to throw themselves into the deep end immediately. Face the biggest fear first. Give the speech to 500 people. Have the hardest conversation right now. And when the result is overwhelming, when the nervous system floods and the experience feels like proof of inadequacy, they conclude that exposure doesn't work for them. It failed because the exposure was too much, too soon. The approach that actually works is progressive exposure. You start at the edge of your comfort zone, not beyond it. You find situations that create mild to moderate discomfort, situations where you feel the stretch without being overwhelmed. You stay there until it becomes comfortable. Then you move the edge slightly further out. This gradual process does something remarkable over time. It's called stress inoculation. Your nervous system becomes progressively more resilient. Your baseline tolerance for pressure increases. Situations that used to make you freeze begin to feel navigable. Challenges that used to drain you begin to energize you. You're not suppressing fear, you're graduating past it. The people around you are rewiring you. 2. There's one more neurological piece worth understanding. Mirror neurons. These are brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. They're how you learn to read social situations, absorb communication styles, and, crucially, pick up on emotional states from the people around you. Confidence is genuinely contagious when you spend consistent time around people who operate from a place of calm, grounded certainty. Your mirror neurons begin adopting those patterns. Your brain starts mimicking what it sees as normal. The inverse is equally true. Chronic exposure to insecurity, anxiety, and self-doubt rewires your baseline in the opposite direction. This isn't about being elitist about who you spend time with. It's about understanding that your environment is always training you, whether you're aware of it or not. Choose accordingly. Chapter 3. The 4-part system for engineering confidence. Now we get practical. Everything I'm about to share is designed not as inspiration, but as installation. A new operating system for how you move through the world. It has 4 components, and they build on each other in a specific sequence. Component 1. Competence stacking. This is the non-negotiable foundation. Here's a pattern I've noticed in people who struggle with confidence. They try to fix the confidence first. They work on their mindset, their self-esteem, their inner dialogue. And while they're doing that work, which isn't without value, they neglect the most direct route to genuine confidence, actually becoming good at things. Your subconscious mind cannot argue with real competence when you know, not hope, not believe, but know that you're genuinely capable in an area. Confidence in that area isn't something you have to manufacture. It arises naturally from the evidence your mind already holds. The problem is that most people approach this too broadly. They tell themselves they want to be more confident at work or better socially. Those targets are too vague to hit. Confidence doesn't live in generalities. It lives in specifics. Instead, you break down the skill set. If you want confidence in professional situations, you identify the specific competencies that create that confidence. Clear written communication, the ability to articulate ideas concisely in meetings, comfort with conflict and disagreement, the ability to present your thinking under scrutiny. Then you choose one, just one, and you develop it through focused, deliberate practice until it becomes genuinely solid. Then you move to the next one. This is competence stacking. You're not building one monolithic tower of confidence. You're laying individual bricks, each one real, each one load-bearing. And as the stack grows, so does the unshakable certainty underneath it. The beauty of this approach is that it's honest. You're not telling yourself you're confident when you're not. You're creating the actual conditions from which real confidence emerges. The feeling follows the competence, not the other way around. Component 2. Social calibration. Most confidence struggles in social situations aren't actually confidence problems. They're calibration problems. Social calibration is your ability to read a room accurately, to understand what's actually happening beneath the surface of interactions, to sense the unspoken dynamics, to know where you stand without needing someone to tell you. When this skill is underdeveloped, your brain fills the gaps with assumptions, and those assumptions almost universally are negative. They didn't laugh. They think I'm not funny. She looked away. I said something wrong. He didn't respond enthusiastically. He doesn't respect me. You're not reading the room. You're projecting your fears onto it. Developing genuine social calibration requires shifting your attention outward. Instead of monitoring yourself, you start studying the environment. You notice who speaks and who listens. You observe how status moves around a room, who gets interrupted, who gets deferred to, who people look toward when a decision needs to be made. You watch how energy shifts when certain people enter or exit. This kind of observation, practiced consistently, develops something invaluable: social certainty. You stop guessing, you start seeing. And when you can see clearly what's actually happening, you don't need confidence as a performance. You simply respond to reality. Component 3, emotional regulation. Here's the honest truth. Your emotional state is a dial, not a switch. And most people are letting external circumstances turn that dial for them. Emotional regulation is the skill of maintaining internal stability regardless of what's happening around you. Not because you don't feel things, but because you've developed the ability to feel things without being run by them. This is what it looks like in practice. You feel nervous before a big conversation, and you still have it. You feel uncertain in a new environment, and you still show up fully. You feel the sting of criticism, and you still evaluate it calmly for what's useful. 3 mechanisms build this skill over time. Breath control is the most immediate. Your breathing directly interfaces with your nervous system. Slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the physiological counterpart to calm, clear-headed functioning. When pressure rises, your breath is the fastest tool you have. Not because it's magic, but because it's biological. Cognitive reframing is the medium-term mechanism. This is the practice of consciously examining how you're interpreting situations and choosing interpretations that are accurate but not catastrophic. A difficult conversation isn't an attack, it's information. A setback isn't proof of your limitations. It's data about what needs to adjust. Exposure conditioning is the long-term mechanism. The more often you enter situations that trigger emotional reactivity and practice staying regulated within them, the lower your reactive baseline becomes. You're training your nervous system the way you'd train a muscle, through progressive, repeated challenge. Component 4, reality distortion. This one requires a careful introduction because the phrase sounds manipulative, and it's not. Reality distortion, as I'm using it here, is your ability to shape the energy and tone of any environment through your presence alone, not through force, not through aggression, through the simple, powerful fact of being completely grounded in yourself. When you walk into a room carrying genuine internal certainty, when you're not performing, not seeking approval, not trying to prove anything, people feel it. Your calm becomes the room's calm. Your clarity becomes the conversation's clarity. This is what psychologists call presence. And it's not a technique you apply. It's what happens when the other 3 components are working in concert. You don't manufacture presence. You create the conditions for it to emerge. Chapter 4. Psychological Warfare. Silencing the voice that's working against you. Let me introduce you to your most persistent opponent. It doesn't live outside you. It doesn't have a face. It doesn't announce itself with hostility or aggression. It operates quietly in the background, running programs you didn't consciously install. And it has been doing this since before you were old enough to question it. Self-doubt. Not the occasional healthy uncertainty that keeps you grounded and honest. I mean the chronic, sophisticated, deeply personal inner voice that knows exactly which words to use to stop you in your tracks. The one that sounds reasonable. The one that disguises itself as wisdom. The one that says you're just being realistic right at the moment you're about to do something that could genuinely change your life. Here's what most people don't understand about self-doubt. It is not a character flaw. It's not evidence that you're broken or weak or less than. It's an ancient protection system. One your brain developed in a world where social rejection wasn't just uncomfortable, it was genuinely life-threatening. In early human communities, being cast out of the group meant exposure, starvation, death. Your brain evolved exquisitely sensitive threat detection systems specifically designed to detect any early signs of social rejection and trigger powerful avoidance responses before the damage could occur. The problem is that this system is running in a world it wasn't built for. Your brain still registers a tense performance review with the same neurological urgency as it would register a genuine survival threat. It still treats the possibility of embarrassment like it's a matter of life or death, not because you're irrational, but because you're human, with ancient wiring trying its best in a modern context. Understanding this changes your relationship with self-doubt. You stop fighting yourself for feeling it. You start seeing it clearly for what it is, a well-intentioned system misfiring in a situation where it isn't needed. And then you learn to work around it. The 5 weapons self-doubt uses against you. Self-doubt isn't random. It uses specific, identifiable tactics. And once you can name them, they lose a significant portion of their power. Weapon 1, catastrophizing. This is when your mind takes a single event and rapidly escalates it to the worst possible conclusion. You forget one point during a presentation, and before you've even finished the sentence, your brain has already arrived at career over, credibility destroyed. Everyone now knows you're a fraud. Notice what's happening there. A single stumble has been extrapolated into a permanent verdict. That's not analysis. That's your ancient threat detection system running on overdrive, treating a minor social imperfection like a catastrophic failure. Catastrophizing burns enormous mental energy on problems that don't exist yet, and often never will. It also creates the very anxiety that makes the feared outcome more likely. You're not preparing for failure. You're rehearsing it. Weapon 2, mind reading. This is the assumption that you know what other people are thinking, and that what they're thinking is negative, and that it's about you. Someone doesn't make eye contact during your pitch, and you know, they think your idea is weak. A colleague gives a brief response to your message, and clearly they're irritated with something you did. A friend seems distracted at dinner, and obviously you said something wrong last week. Here's the statistical reality. The vast majority of the time, people are absorbed in their own internal world, their own pressures, their own insecurities, their own mental to-do lists. You are not the protagonist of their internal narrative, And even when they are thinking about you, it's rarely with the critical intensity your mind assigns to it. Mind reading is your anxiety wearing the costume of social intelligence. Don't let it fool you. Weapon 3. Fortune telling. This is predicting negative outcomes with absolute certainty, and then making decisions based on that prediction as if it were established fact. You don't apply for the role because you already know you won't get it. You don't start the project because you can already see how it will fall apart. You don't have the conversation because you can already predict how it will go. This isn't wisdom. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. When you treat an imagined negative outcome as certain, you either don't try at all, guaranteeing the outcome, or you try with so little conviction that you underperform. Either way, your prediction comes true, and your brain files that as evidence that your instincts were right. The cycle feeds itself. Weapon 4. Personalization. Someone has a difficult day and snaps at you, and you spend the rest of the afternoon examining what you did wrong. A group project underperforms, and even though there were 5 contributors and a dozen variables, your mind zeroes in on your contribution as the probable cause. A conversation ends awkwardly, and you replay every word you said looking for the mistake. Personalization is the habit of making yourself the central cause of negative events that often have nothing to do with you. It creates a false sense of control. If it's your fault, then you can fix it, while simultaneously loading you with guilt and shame for things you didn't actually cause. Most of what goes wrong around you is not about you. People are complex, circumstances are messy, and outcomes have many authors. You are one variable in a system of many. Weapon 5. All or nothing thinking. Either you nailed it or you failed completely. Either you're good at this or you're not. Either the relationship is working perfectly or it's broken. Either you're disciplined or you're a disaster. This binary framing makes nuance impossible and grace almost entirely unavailable, because nothing in real life is all or nothing. Every performance has elements that worked and elements that didn't. Every skill exists on a spectrum that you move along gradually. Every relationship has seasons. When you demand perfection as the only acceptable outcome, you guarantee chronic disappointment, because perfection isn't a destination anyone arrives at. It's an ever-receding horizon. Your defense system. 3 tools that actually work. Now that you understand the weapons, here's how you build your defense. Tool 1. Cognitive diffusion. This technique comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's deceptively simple and genuinely powerful. Cognitive diffusion is the practice of creating distance between you and your thoughts, recognizing thoughts as mental events rather than established truths. The shift looks like this. Instead of thinking, I'm going to fail, you think, I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail. That small addition, I'm having the thought that, does something remarkable. It reminds you that a thought is not a fact. It's a signal from your nervous system, filtered through your history, shaped by your fears. It deserves examination, not automatic obedience. Practice this consistently, and you'll notice a gradual loosening of the grip that anxious thoughts have on your behavior. You can acknowledge the thought, examine it, and then choose your action independently of it. Tool 2. The evidence standard. Self-doubt makes assertions with enormous confidence. Your job is to demand the same standard of proof from your inner critic that you would demand from anyone else making a bold claim. When your mind says, everyone in that meeting thought you were out of your depth, ask for evidence. What specific behavior indicated that? What was actually said or done that supports this conclusion? When you hold the thought up to scrutiny, you'll find that most of the time there's nothing solid there, just pattern matching and fear dressed up as insight. When there is something solid, when the feedback is real and specific and worth examining, you engage with it. You extract what's useful. You leave what isn't. The evidence standard doesn't make you defensive. It makes you discerning. Tool 3, self-compassion. I want to be clear about what self-compassion is not. It is not lowering your standards. It is not excusing mediocrity. It is not telling yourself that everything is fine when it isn't. Self-compassion is treating yourself with the same basic decency and understanding you would extend to someone you genuinely care about. Think about how you would respond if a close friend came to you after a difficult day, after they stumbled through a presentation or received a painful rejection or made a mistake at work. You would not say, "See, this is exactly why you're not good enough." You would acknowledge that it was hard. You would offer perspective. You would remind them that one difficult moment doesn't define a person. You deserve that same response from yourself. Self-compassion doesn't eliminate the desire to improve. It actually supports it, because shame and self-criticism create the kind of internal environment where people contract, avoid, and protect themselves, whereas self-compassion creates the kind of internal safety where people are willing to try again. The most confident people you know are not the harshest with themselves. They're the most honest and the most forgiving. Chapter 5. The Alpha Presence. Blueprint. Presence is where confidence becomes visible. Everything in the previous chapters, the competence, the regulated emotions, the quiet inner certainty, all of that is internal. Presence is where it surfaces into the world. It's the way confidence communicates itself without words, before you've spoken a single sentence, sometimes before you've even been noticed. And here's what most people get fundamentally wrong about presence. They think it's about being more, louder, more assertive, more commanding, more dominant. That's not presence. That's performance anxiety wearing an expensive suit. Real presence is not about addition. It's about subtraction. It's about removing the performance, stripping away the self-monitoring, and simply being here fully, completely, without apology. When you stop trying to project confidence and start actually being present, something shifts. Other people feel it. They can't always name it, but they orient toward it. They listen more carefully when you speak. They lean in slightly. They find themselves trusting you before they've consciously decided to. That's the paradox of presence. The less you try to create it, the more powerfully it emerges. Presence operates across 4 channels. You need to develop all 4 for the full effect. Channel 1. Physical presence. Your body is communicating constantly, not just to other people, but to your own nervous system. Most people carry chronic physical tension they're not even aware of. Shoulders slightly raised, jaw subtly clenched, chest slightly contracted, breath shallow. This tension is your body's ongoing response to low-level perceived threat. And it doesn't just signal insecurity to others. It actually reinforces the neurological state of insecurity within you. Physical presence begins with your relationship to your own body weight. Instead of fighting gravity, holding yourself up, bracing, contracting, you learn to settle into it. You let your shoulders drop to their natural position. You breathe into your belly rather than your chest. You feel the ground beneath your feet. You unclench. This isn't a posture hack. It's a physiological reset that sends a direct signal to your nervous system. We are not under threat. And when your nervous system receives that signal, it allows the prefrontal cortex to come back online, the part of your brain responsible for clarity, connection, and genuine engagement. Eye contact deserves its own attention here. Most people are at one of two extremes: avoiding eye contact, which reads as evasion or low confidence, or using it like a staring contest, which reads as aggression or discomfort. Genuine, confident eye contact is neither. It's warm, steady, and interested. The key is to stop thinking about your eye contact and start genuinely focusing on the other person. When your attention is truly on them, when you're actually curious about what they're saying, eye contact becomes natural. You're not performing connection. You're making it. Movement is the third element. Confident people move with intention, not stiffly, not robotically, but purposefully. Each gesture, each shift of position, each movement through a space feels considered rather than reactive. There's no nervous fidgeting, no restless repositioning, no energy leaking out through unnecessary movement. Practice becoming aware of how you move when no one is watching. Then make that your default. Channel 2. Vocal presence. Your voice carries far more information than your words. Before anyone has processed the content of what you're saying, they've already made dozens of unconscious assessments based on your tone, your pace, your volume, and the resonance of your voice. These assessments influence whether they find you credible, trustworthy, and worth listening to. The foundation of vocal presence is breath support. When you're anxious or rushed, you breathe shallowly and speak from your throat. The result is a voice that sounds thin, pressured, and slightly strained, which paradoxically increases the feeling of anxiety. When you breathe deeply and speak from your diaphragm, your voice naturally becomes fuller, warmer, and more grounded. It carries further with less effort. Pace is where most people lose ground immediately. Nervous speech is fast speech. When you're uncertain whether you deserve the floor, you rush, trying to say everything before someone takes it back. But pace communicates authority more directly than almost any other vocal quality. The person who speaks at a measured, deliberate pace, who is genuinely comfortable with silence, who pauses without filling every gap, communicates that they have somewhere to stand, that they're not trying to squeeze in before the window closes. Learn to be comfortable with silence. A well-placed pause says more than 10 filler words ever could. Tonality is the final dimension. Avoid the two extremes. Monotone delivery, which reads as disengaged or unconfident, and performative enthusiasm, which reads as trying too hard. The sweet spot is warmth and variation, a voice that rises and falls naturally because you're genuinely engaged with what you're communicating. Talk like you're having a real conversation, not delivering a rehearsed speech, even when it is a rehearsed speech. Channel 3. Emotional presence. This is the capacity to remain internally stable while being fully open to what's happening around you. Most people do one of two things in emotionally charged environments. They either absorb the room's energy, picking up anxiety, tension, or conflict, and amplifying it internally, or they shut down, closing themselves off to manage the discomfort, which makes them seem detached or disinterested. Emotional presence is the third option, remaining fully open and engaged while being internally anchored. When you have strong emotional presence, other people's anxiety doesn't become your anxiety. Their urgency doesn't become your urgency. Their negativity doesn't contaminate your state. You can be in the middle of a tense situation and remain still point that others orient around. This quality is extraordinarily rare, and it is extraordinarily magnetic. It develops through meditation and mindfulness practice, not as spiritual concepts, but as practical training for the specific skill of observing your internal experience without being swept away by it. You learn to feel the emotional weather without becoming the storm. Channel 4. Mental presence. This is the quality of your attention. In an era of fractured focus, where most of us are somewhere between half and three-quarters present in any given interaction, genuine full attention is one of the most powerful gifts you can offer another person, and one of the most powerful signals of confidence you can project. When you're mentally present, you're not preparing your next point while someone is still making theirs. You're not monitoring how you're coming across. You're not running parallel simulations of how this conversation might go. You're simply here, listening, processing, responding to what's actually being said rather than to the story in your head about what's being said. People feel this. They feel it as being genuinely heard. And being genuinely heard, in a world where that's increasingly rare, creates deep, immediate trust. Mental presence also means thinking before you speak, not in a way that makes you hesitant or stilted, but in a way that means your words are chosen. They're clear. They go somewhere. You say what you mean, and you mean what you say, and there's no fog between intention and expression. When all four channels are operating together, physical groundedness, vocal clarity, emotional stability, and genuine mental engagement, presence becomes something other people experience as almost tangible. They don't know why they trust you. They just do. Chapter 6. Social dominance. Influencing without force. Let's redefine a word. Dominance. I know what that word probably conjures. Aggression, hierarchy, the kind of alpha posturing you've seen in every movie where the loudest person in the room gets confused with the most powerful. That's not what I mean. That kind of dominance is usually insecurity looking for a costume. Real social dominance is quieter, smarter, and far more effective. It's the ability to walk into any environment and naturally shape the dynamics, not by forcing anything, but by being so clear about who you are and what you bring that others naturally organize around you. You don't demand the room, you simply take your place in it, and the room adjusts. This operates through 4 core principles. Principle 1. Frame control. Every interaction has a frame, a shared interpretation of what's happening, what it means, and what the appropriate response is. In any conversation, there's usually a competition between different frames. Whoever maintains theirs most consistently under pressure wins the social negotiation. Here's a simple example. You propose an idea in a meeting, and someone challenges it dismissively. You have options. You could accept their frame, this is a flawed idea, and become defensive or apologetic. You could reject their frame, this is an attack, and become hostile. Or you could maintain your own frame, this is a worthy idea worth examining, and push back is part of that examination. Which frame you hold determines how the interaction unfolds. Strong frame control doesn't mean being rigid or dismissive of input. It means having enough inner certainty that external pressure doesn't collapse your perspective. You can genuinely consider other views and sometimes update them without losing the ground you stand on. The key is this: your frame is never defensive. You don't hold it by arguing or resisting. You hold it by simply remaining grounded. There's nothing to defend when you're not threatened. Principle 2, strategic positioning. Where you place yourself, physically, socially, and psychologically, determines how much influence you have before you've done or said anything. Physically, this means being aware of how you occupy space. In group environments, confident people don't hover at the edges, hoping to be noticed. They position themselves where engagement is natural, not aggressively central, but visibly present. Socially, you position yourself as someone who adds value, not through self-promotion, but through consistent contribution. You're the person who asks the question that opens the conversation up. Who makes the introduction that connects two people who needed to meet? Who offers the perspective that reframes a stuck problem? You don't try to be the most interesting person in the room. You try to be the most useful, and useful people are remembered, sought out, and respected. Psychologically, you position yourself from a place of completeness rather than need. You're not in the room to get something, approval, status, validation. You're in the room to contribute and connect. That orientation is felt by everyone around you, and it's one of the most powerful positioning choices you can make. Principle 3, strategic communication. Every word you speak is either building something or undermining it. This isn't about being calculating or artificial. It's about being conscious, aware that your communication lands beyond just its literal content. Tone, timing, word choice, what you say and what you leave unsaid, all of it contributes to how you're perceived and how much influence you carry. The most important thing to develop here is tonality mastery. The same sentence, delivered in different tones, can convey authority or uncertainty, warmth or coldness, openness or defensiveness. You need to develop enough conscious awareness of your own tonality that you can calibrate it to your actual intention. Equally important is the skill of strategic silence. Confident people are not afraid of pauses. They don't rush to fill conversational gaps out of anxiety. They let silence do its work, creating space for reflection, adding weight to what was just said, or simply communicating that they're not in a hurry. The person who speaks last and least often carries disproportionate conversational authority. Use that. Principle 4, emotional independence. This is perhaps the deepest principle of social dominance, and it's the one that makes everything else sustainable. Emotional independence means that your internal state is not contingent on other people's reactions, approval, or behavior. You can genuinely care about people, be warm, engaged, interested, without being dependent on their response for your equilibrium. When someone is cold toward you, you don't immediately assume you've done something wrong. When someone disagrees with your idea, you don't experience it as a threat to your worth. When you don't get the reaction you hoped for, you don't spiral. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you stable. And stability is one of the most attractive and trustworthy qualities a person can project, because it communicates that interacting with you is safe. You won't destabilize if challenged. You won't crumble if disagreed with. You won't escalate if someone is having a difficult moment. People trust those who remain steady when everything else is moving. Become that person. Chapter 7. Bulletproof Psychology. Building Armor Without Closing Off. Here's something nobody prepares you for. The moment you start becoming genuinely confident. The moment you stop shrinking, start speaking up, begin taking up the space that was always yours, people will push back. Not all of them, not even most of them, but some will. And it won't always look like obvious hostility. Sometimes it's a subtle, undermining comment delivered with a smile. Sometimes it's a dismissive response to an idea you were proud of. Sometimes it's someone casually challenging your credibility in front of others. Sometimes it's a rejection that lands in a place you didn't know was still tender. How you handle these moments determines everything. Because here's the reality. You can build all the internal confidence in the world, and if you haven't built the psychological armor to protect it from external attacks, one difficult interaction can unravel weeks of progress. Not because you're weak, but because you were never taught how to defend yourself psychologically. Bulletproof psychology is not about becoming hard. It's not about pretending things don't affect you or performing indifference you don't feel. It's about developing such deep internal stability that external negativity cannot reach your core sense of self. You can feel the impact of a difficult interaction without letting it rewrite your story about who you are. Understanding the people who attack. Before you can defend yourself effectively, you need to understand what's actually happening when someone tries to tear you down. Genuinely secure people don't need to undermine others. Think about the most confident, grounded person you know. Really picture them. Now ask yourself, do they spend energy criticizing others, diminishing people's ideas, or trying to make others feel small? Almost certainly not. Because when you're truly secure, other people's success doesn't feel like a threat. Their confidence doesn't make you feel less. Their growth doesn't diminish yours. There's room for everyone. The people who attack are the ones who haven't learned this yet. They're operating from scarcity, from a place where someone else's rising tide feels like it's somehow lowering theirs. When someone tries to undermine your confidence, they're showing you their own wound, not diagnosing yours. This doesn't mean you accept the behavior. It means you don't internalize it as evidence of your inadequacy. There's a crucial difference between those two things. Two types of criticism and how to handle each. Not everything that challenges you is an attack. Developing the ability to distinguish between genuine feedback and destructive criticism is one of the most important skills you'll build. Constructive feedback is specific. It refers to observable behaviors or outcomes. It's offered in a context where improvement is the clear purpose. The person giving it has some legitimate standing to assess what they're assessing. And when you receive it, even if it stings initially, it points toward something actionable. This kind of feedback is a gift. Not always a comfortable one, but a gift. You receive it, you examine it honestly. You extract whatever is useful, and you let the rest go. Your confidence doesn't need to deflate to receive feedback. A secure person can hear, "Here's where this could be better," without hearing, "Here's proof that you're not good enough." Destructive criticism is different in almost every dimension. It's vague and global. "You're just not cut out for this," rather than anything specific. It's delivered with an edge that isn't about your improvement. It often targets your character rather than your behavior, and it comes from people who have no particular standing to assess what they're assessing. This kind of input doesn't deserve the same thoughtful engagement. It deserves acknowledgement. You can hear it without being defensive about it. And then release. You don't argue with it. You don't internalize it. You simply don't hand it the authority to matter. The discriminating question to ask yourself when any criticism lands, is this person qualified to assess this? And do they have my genuine improvement as their purpose? If yes, receive it. If no, let it pass. Building cognitive immunity. Cognitive immunity is your ability to evaluate information about yourself objectively rather than automatically. Most people have no filter between external input and internal belief. Someone says something negative about them, and within seconds, the inner critic has picked it up and is running with it, adding context, finding supporting evidence, weaving it into a narrative. Cognitive immunity inserts a pause between input and belief. It asks, is this true? What evidence exists for or against it? Would a thoughtful, fair observer agree with this assessment? When you apply this consistently, you develop a sophisticated internal filter that lets genuinely useful information through while blocking noise and malice. You become like a carefully calibrated instrument, sensitive enough to receive real signal, insulated enough to reject interference. This isn't about defending your ego, it's about maintaining the accuracy of your self-assessment. Because your confidence should be based on reality, on an honest, evidence-based view of your actual capabilities and growth. That view is corrupted both by uncritical self-criticism and by uncritical self-protection. The goal is clarity, not harshness, not defensiveness. Clarity, emotional detachment from outcomes. Here's one of the most counterintuitive insights in this entire framework. The less your confidence depends on specific outcomes, the more consistently you'll perform. And paradoxically, the better your outcomes will tend to be. When your confidence is tied to results, every interaction becomes a test that you can pass or fail. Every conversation becomes a verdict. Every pitch, every presentation, every difficult exchange carries the weight of your self-worth. That weight is crushing. It creates the exact kind of performance anxiety that prevents you from showing up fully and naturally. Emotional detachment from outcomes doesn't mean you don't care. You care deeply about your preparation, your effort, your craft, your contribution. But you release the attachment to how specifically those things are received. You give everything to the process. You release control of the result. This frees you to be present, to be fully in the room rather than mentally half outside it, monitoring how it's going. And full presence, as we've already established, is where your best performance lives. Practically, this looks like shifting your self-evaluation metric from "how did it go" to "did I prepare thoroughly, show up fully, and act in alignment with my values?" Those are things you can always control. The reception is not. Reframing adversity as strength training. Every challenge you face, every criticism, every rejection, every uncomfortable interaction is doing something to you physiologically and psychologically. The question is whether it's making you more fragile or more resilient. And the answer depends almost entirely on how you interpret it. When you frame adversity as evidence of your inadequacy, "this happened because I'm not good enough," it contracts you. You become more cautious, more avoidant, more defended. Your confidence diminishes because you've added another data point to the case against yourself. When you frame adversity as training, this happened, and now I'm more capable of handling this kind of situation, it expands you. You become more resilient, more adaptable, more capable. Your confidence grows because your evidence base for handling difficulty has just increased. Same event, completely different trajectory. This is not toxic positivity. It's not pretending the difficulty didn't hurt or that the setback wasn't real. It's choosing the interpretation that serves your growth without falsifying your experience. Every difficult interaction you navigate becomes part of your track record. And your track record is what your confidence is actually built on. Diversifying your sources of self-worth. One of the most significant vulnerabilities in most people's confidence architecture is concentration. They've built their entire sense of self on one or two pillars: their professional role, their relationship status, their physical appearance, their social standing in a particular community. And because all the weight is on those pillars, any threat to them feels existential. Bulletproof psychology requires spreading the load. Your self-worth should draw from your character, your honesty, your reliability, your kindness, from your relationships, the genuine connections you maintain, from your growth, the distance you've covered from where you started, from your values, the principles you hold and actually live by, from your contribution, the ways you make things better for others. When your confidence draws from this breadth of sources, any single threat becomes manageable. Your career hitting a difficult patch doesn't collapse your identity because your identity isn't housed entirely there. A relationship ending painfully doesn't erase your sense of self because your self is larger than any single relationship. This diversification also means developing internal validation alongside external validation. You learn to acknowledge your own progress, to notice your own growth, to appreciate your own effort, not instead of receiving appreciation from others, but in addition to it. You become less dependent on the mirror of other people's responses to know who you are. Chapter 8. High-pressure performance. When everything is on the line. Anyone can feel confident when the stakes are low. When the meeting is informal, when the relationship is established, when the outcome barely matters, confidence is easy. It costs nothing. It requires nothing. It's available to almost everyone. But take those same people and put them into a situation where the stakes are genuinely high, where the outcome actually matters, where judgment is real, where the pressure is palpable. And watch what happens to the confidence that seemed so accessible a moment ago. For most people, it evaporates, not because they lacked intelligence or preparation or genuine capability, but because nobody taught them how to perform under pressure, how to access their full capability precisely when the demand for it is highest, how to be their best when being their best costs the most. This chapter is about that skill, and it is a skill, learnable, trainable, and available to you. Understanding the pressure response. When stakes increase, your nervous system does exactly what it's designed to do. It activates. Stress hormones flood your system. Heart rate climbs. Breathing becomes shallower. Attention narrows. And the prefrontal cortex, your strategic thinking center, begins to quiet down. For most people, This physiological cascade is experienced as an enemy, something to suppress, manage, or overcome. And the effort of suppressing it consumes the very cognitive resources they need to perform. But here's the insight that changes everything. The physiological experience of pressure is not inherently negative. The same arousal that derails one person's performance enhances another's. The same racing heart, the same heightened alertness, the same surge of energy, identical physiological events, radically different performance outcomes. The difference is not in the intensity of the response, it's in the interpretation. Reframing arousal as readiness research from Harvard psychologist Alison Wood Brooks demonstrates something remarkable. People who reframe pre-performance anxiety as excitement consistently outperform those who try to calm themselves down. The physiological signatures of anxiety and excitement are nearly identical. Elevated heart rate, heightened alertness, increased energy and activation. The only meaningful difference is the story you attached to those sensations. Anxiety says, something might go wrong and I might not be able to handle it. Excitement says, something important is happening and I'm ready to meet it. When your heart rate climbs before a high-stakes conversation, instead of thinking, I'm nervous, this is a problem, you consciously choose the thought, I'm activated. My system is preparing me to perform. This isn't positive thinking in the empty affirmation sense. This is accurate reinterpretation of a physiological state. Your body is genuinely preparing you. You're simply choosing to receive that preparation as resource rather than threat. With consistent practice, this reframe becomes faster and more automatic. Eventually, the activation itself becomes a signal you welcome because you've learned through experience that it precedes your best performances. The zone state and how to access it. Every high performer has had the experience, the conversation where you were completely absorbed, where the right words came effortlessly, where time felt different and effort felt almost absent. The presentation where you were fully in it, fully alive, fully yourself, and afterward you couldn't quite explain how it happened. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called this flow. Athletes call it the zone. Whatever the name, the experience is characterized by the same cluster of qualities: complete present moment absorption, effortless performance, disappeared self-consciousness, and a quality of timelessness. This state has specific conditions that reliably invite it. Clear objectives. You know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. Not a vague aspiration, but a specific, concrete goal for this interaction or this performance. Immediate feedback. You have real-time information about how you're doing through the other person's responses, through your own internal sense, through observable signals in the environment. Balanced challenge. The situation is neither too easy, which breeds boredom and disengagement, nor overwhelming, which breeds panic and shutdown. It sits precisely at the edge of your current capability, demanding your full effort without exceeding your capacity. When these three conditions are present, the zone becomes accessible, and you can deliberately create them rather than waiting for them to appear spontaneously. Preparation that builds confidence rather than rigidity. Most people prepare for high-pressure situations by trying to memorize specific responses, rehearsing exactly what they'll say, anticipating specific questions, scripting particular exchanges. This type of preparation actually increases pressure rather than reducing it, because When you're dependent on specific conditions and specific responses, any deviation from the script feels like the floor dropping out. The unexpected becomes threatening rather than interesting. Preparation that genuinely builds confidence works differently. Instead of rehearsing specific answers, you deepen your knowledge so thoroughly that you can speak fluently from any angle. Instead of scripting specific exchanges, you develop adaptive skills that apply regardless of how the situation unfolds. The goal of preparation is not to reduce surprise. It's to increase your confidence in your ability to handle whatever surprises arise. This is what psychologists call self-efficacy. Not confidence that a specific outcome will occur, but confidence in your ability to navigate toward a good outcome from whatever starting point you're given. Self-efficacy is far more robust than outcome-specific confidence because it doesn't depend on circumstances going according to plan. Plan for adaptability. Prepare your capability, not your script. Breath as your nervous system. Remote control. When pressure peaks, the fastest intervention available to you requires no equipment, no preparation, and no one else's cooperation. Your breath. Your breathing pattern directly influences your autonomic nervous system, the system that governs whether you're in a state of activation or calm. Slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing with an extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for recovery, clear thinking, and regulated emotion. The specific pattern that works most reliably under pressure. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold briefly for 2 counts. Exhale slowly for 6 counts. The extended exhale is the critical element. It's the exhale that triggers the parasympathetic shift. 3 to 5 cycles of this done before or during a high-stakes situation produces measurable changes in heart rate variability, cortisol levels, and cognitive clarity. You're not suppressing the activation. You're channeling it into a state where it enhances rather than impairs your performance. Practice this in low-stakes situations until it becomes automatic, so that when high stakes arrive, the tool is already in your hands. Strategic thinking under emotional pressure creates tunnel vision. It pulls your attention to the immediate moment, the thing in front of you right now, and away from the broader context that should be informing your decisions. When you're in tunnel vision, you react. You respond to what's happening now rather than thinking about what should happen next. You make decisions based on the most emotionally salient factor rather than the most strategically important one. Interrupting this requires a deliberate mental maneuver, zooming out. When you feel the tunnel closing, you pause, even briefly, and ask, what am I actually trying to accomplish here? What are my real options? What would a calm, strategic version of me do in this moment? This question creates a sliver of space between stimulus and response, and in that sliver, your prefrontal cortex can come back online. You can access the broader perspective that pressure was obscuring. The pause doesn't make you slow. It makes you accurate, and accuracy under pressure is worth far more than speed. Chapter 9. Unshakable Self-Worth. Confidence from the core. We've spent significant time building tools, techniques for managing your psychology, your physiology, your social environment, and those tools matter. But tools require a foundation, and if the foundation isn't solid, the most sophisticated toolkit in the world won't hold. Here's the honest assessment of where most people's confidence actually lives. It lives in their results, in their job title, in whether they're in a relationship or not, in how their body looks, in how many people engage with their ideas, in whether the last thing they tried worked out. That's not a foundation, that's a weather vane. It points wherever the wind is blowing. Unshakable self-worth is something different. It's confidence that doesn't require external conditions to remain stable. It doesn't inflate when things go well and deflate when they don't. It exists beneath your circumstances rather than being determined by them. Building this is the deepest work in this entire framework, and the most important. Pillar 1. Separating identity from results. You are not your outcomes. You are not your job performance, your bank balance, your relationship status, your creative output, or your social media metrics. These things are expressions of your effort in specific contexts at specific times. They are not definitions of your worth as a person. This distinction sounds simple. Living it is genuinely difficult, especially in a culture that constantly equates achievement with value. The practice is to develop what psychologists call outcome independence, the ability to care deeply about your results while not deriving your identity from them. You're invested in performing well. You're not devastated when you don't. You're proud of genuine success. You're not dependent on it for your sense of self. Practically, this requires shifting your primary self-evaluation lens from outcomes to process. Did you prepare as thoroughly as you could? Did you show up fully? Did you act in alignment with your values? Did you give your genuine effort? Those are always within your control. The outcome often isn't. Evaluate yourself on what you can actually govern, and you free yourself from the tyranny of results-dependent confidence. Pillar 2. Unconditional self-acceptance. This is not settling. Let me be clear about that. Unconditional self-acceptance doesn't mean you're satisfied with where you are, or that you stop wanting to grow, or that you lower your standards for yourself. It means you accept where you are right now as your legitimate starting point, rather than treating your current self as an obstacle to be overcome before you deserve to feel okay. Most people are in constant internal warfare with themselves. They'll feel good about themselves when they've lost the weight, achieved the goal, fixed the flaw, reached the milestone. Until then, there's a background verdict of not quite there yet running constantly beneath the surface. That verdict is not a motivator, it's a drain. It consumes energy that could be going toward actual growth. And it means that even when you reach the milestone, you don't actually feel better, because the internal critic simply moves the threshold. Unconditional self-acceptance says, I am a person in progress. Where I am is not where I'm staying. And both of those things are okay. From that foundation, growth becomes something you move toward freely, rather than something you're desperately trying to earn the right to feel good about. Pillar 3. Values as your North Star. Here's a question most people have never genuinely sat with. What do you actually stand for? Not what you think you should stand for. Not what's socially admirable or professionally strategic. What do you, in the genuine center of yourself, actually value? When you're unclear about your values, you drift. You make decisions based on what others expect, or what seems safest, or what's most immediately comfortable. And when you drift consistently, you develop a particular kind of insecurity. Not fear of any specific thing, but a background uncertainty about who you actually are. Identifying your genuine values and then living in consistent alignment with them creates something that no external achievement can: coherence. The feeling that your inner life and your outer life are telling the same story, that what you do reflects what you believe. This coherence is the bedrock of self-worth that doesn't need external validation, because it doesn't come from external sources. It comes from the daily, repeating experience of being who you actually are. Pillar 4. Intrinsic motivation. The most sustainable confidence is built on doing things because they genuinely matter to you, not because they'll earn you approval, status, or safety. When your motivation is intrinsic, your energy is self-renewing. You pursue growth because growth itself is satisfying. You develop skills because the development itself is meaningful. The external rewards, the recognition, financial return, status, are welcome when they come, but they're not the engine. When your motivation is primarily extrinsic, your energy is borrowed. Every effort is an investment waiting for a return. When the return doesn't come, when the work goes unnoticed, when the effort isn't rewarded, when the approval doesn't materialize, the motivation collapses along with the confidence. Finding your genuine intrinsic motivations requires honest examination. What activities make time disappear? What challenges energize rather than drain you? What work would you continue doing even if no one was watching and no one was rewarding you for it? These aren't trivial questions. They're maps to the confidence that doesn't run out. Pillar 5. Becoming anti-fragile resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity to where you were. Anti-fragility, a concept developed by Nassim Taleb, is something more. The ability to come back stronger than you started because of the adversity. Fragile things break under pressure. Resilient things hold. Anti-fragile things and anti-fragile people actually improve through challenge. You build anti-fragility by choosing to engage with difficulty rather than avoiding it, by seeking out situations that stretch you, and then mining every difficult experience, every failure, every setback, every uncomfortable moment for what it taught you that you couldn't have learned any other way. The confidence that emerges from this process is qualitatively different from confidence that's been protected from challenge. It's been tested. It has scars that are now sources of strength. It knows, not theoretically, but from lived experience, that it can handle what comes. That knowledge is unshakable because it's earned. Chapter 10. Mental bulletproofing. Building a mind nothing can break. There's a difference between being confident and being unbreakable. Confidence is what you project. Unbreakability is what remains when everything around you is in chaos. When the project fails, when the relationship ends, when the plan collapses, when the thing you were certain about turns out to be uncertain after all. Most people discover their psychological limits at exactly the wrong moment. Not in training, not in preparation, but in the middle of a situation that matters, when the pressure is highest and the cost of falling apart is greatest. Mental bulletproofing is the process of building psychological infrastructure so solid that nothing can crack it. Not a specific rejection, not a devastating failure, not sustained criticism, not prolonged uncertainty. You build a mind that doesn't just survive adversity. It metabolizes it, turns it into fuel, comes out of difficult seasons not diminished but denser, more capable, more certain. This isn't about emotional numbness. It isn't about pretending difficult things don't hurt. It's about developing roots deep enough that no storm can uproot you, while staying fully open to the full experience of being alive. Element 1. Psychological flexibility. Rigid things break, flexible things bend and return. Psychological flexibility is your capacity to adapt your thinking and behavior in response to changing circumstances without losing your core identity in the process. It's the difference between someone who has one strategy for every situation and therefore struggles whenever that strategy doesn't fit, and someone who has a fluid, responsive repertoire that adjusts in real time. Most people develop psychological rigidity without realizing it. They find approaches that work in certain contexts and then apply them universally. They develop fixed interpretations of specific types of situations. They settle into patterns of thinking that feel like just how I see things, but are actually habits of perception that could be otherwise. Rigidity creates a specific kind of fragility. Everything is fine as long as circumstances cooperate. The moment they don't, the moment the familiar context shifts, the trusted approach fails, the expected outcome doesn't materialize, the rigid person doesn't adapt. They double down, or they freeze, or they collapse. Flexibility develops through deliberate exposure to situations that challenge your default approaches. You seek out environments where your usual strategies don't work, and then you find new ones. You engage with perspectives that genuinely differ from yours, not to adopt them wholesale, but to expand your understanding of the territory you're navigating. Every time you successfully adapt to an unexpected situation, you build evidence that you can adapt, that your capability isn't limited to the conditions you prepared for, that you can figure things out in real time. This evidence is extraordinarily confidence-building because it means your confidence doesn't depend on circumstances going according to plan. Element 2. Stress tolerance as a trainable capacity. Here's a reframe that changes everything about how you approach difficulty. Stress tolerance is not a fixed trait you were born with or without. It is a capacity, exactly like a physical capacity, that expands through progressive training and contracts through consistent avoidance. When you consistently avoid situations that create stress, your tolerance for stress actually decreases. Small pressures begin to feel large. Minor uncertainties feel threatening. Low-stakes challenges feel high stakes. Your nervous system, which is always calibrating its sense of normal based on your actual experience, adjusts its threshold downward. When you consistently engage with manageable stress, when you deliberately put yourself in situations that create discomfort and navigate through them, your tolerance expands. The same objective level of pressure that once felt overwhelming begins to feel navigable. Your nervous system recalibrates upward. The key word in all of this is manageable. Progressive stress training follows the same principles as progressive physical training. You work at the edge of your current capacity, not so far beyond it that you overwhelm your system, but consistently enough beyond your comfort zone that your capacity grows. A person who consistently has slightly difficult conversations develops the tolerance and skill to eventually navigate very difficult ones. A person who consistently takes on projects with moderate uncertainty develops the capacity to eventually operate confidently in highly uncertain environments. You don't arrive at high stress tolerance by wishing for it. You build it incrementally through thousands of small engagements with discomfort. Element 3. Existential confidence. This is the layer of confidence that most frameworks never reach, and its absence is why many people find that even after building real competence and genuine skills, something still feels uncertain at a deeper level. Existential confidence is confidence in your ability to create meaning and direction for yourself, regardless of what external circumstances provide or withhold. Most people outsource their sense of meaning. Their job gives them purpose, until it doesn't. Their relationship gives them direction, until it ends. Their achievement gives them significance, until it fades. And each time an external source of meaning changes or disappears, they experience not just disappointment, but a genuine identity crisis. Who am I without this? That reveals how much of their foundation was rented rather than owned. Existential confidence is the work of building a foundation you own, asking the questions that most people perpetually defer. What do I actually believe about what makes a life worthwhile? What kind of person am I genuinely trying to become? What matters enough to orient my choices around, independent of what's fashionable or expected? These aren't questions you answer once and file away. They're questions you return to throughout your life, because your answers will evolve as you do. But the practice of engaging with them, of taking genuine responsibility for your own sense of meaning, creates an internal compass that guides you through even the most disorienting external circumstances. When you have existential confidence, losing a job is hard, but it doesn't mean losing yourself. A relationship ending is painful, but it doesn't mean losing your direction. A dream not working out is genuinely disappointing, but it doesn't mean losing your sense of what you're building toward. The ground holds because it's yours. Element 4. Learned optimism. Let me distinguish this clearly from the empty positivity that passes for optimism in most self-help conversations. Learned optimism, as defined by psychologist Martin Seligman through decades of research, is not a mood or a personality type. It's a specific set of thinking patterns, a way of explaining events to yourself that predicts resilience, performance, and well-being with remarkable accuracy. The key distinction is in how you explain adversity to yourself across 3 dimensions. Permanence. When something goes wrong, do you interpret it as permanent? This is just how things are for me. Or temporary? This is a difficult period that will change. Pervasiveness. Do you interpret a specific failure as global? I fail at everything. Or specific? I struggled with this particular thing. Personalization. Do you interpret negative events as entirely personal? This happened because of who I am? Or do you recognize external factors? This happened because of a combination of factors, some of which involve me and some of which don't. Pessimistic explanatory style. Permanent, pervasive, personal. Creates learned helplessness. You stop trying because your nervous system has concluded that your efforts don't change outcomes. Optimistic explanatory style, temporary, specific, nuanced, preserves agency. You continue engaging, adapting, and investing effort because your nervous system understands that situations change and that your actions influence outcomes. This is trainable. You develop it by consciously examining your explanatory patterns when things go wrong, catching the permanent, global, and over-personalized interpretations and deliberately replacing them with more accurate, nuanced ones. Not because it feels better, because it's actually more accurate. Bad events are rarely permanent, rarely global, and rarely entirely personal. Learned optimism is not about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. It's about seeing it clearly, rather than through the distorting lens of pessimistic bias. Element 5, equanimity under any condition. This is the quality that makes the previous 4 sustainable. Equanimity is the ability to remain internally balanced regardless of whether external conditions are favorable or unfavorable. Not indifferent, fully engaged, fully present, genuinely affected by what's happening, but not destabilized by it. Think of the image of a deep ocean. On the surface, there are waves, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, responding to weather and wind. But beneath the surface, the water is still. The depth creates stability that the surface turbulence can't penetrate. Equanimity is that depth in a person. You experience the surface weather of life, the excitement of success, the difficulty of failure, the pleasure of recognition, the sting of criticism, without being defined or derailed by any of it. You ride the waves because you have depth beneath them. This quality develops through meditation and mindfulness practice, not as spiritual bypass, but as genuine training in the skill of witnessing your experience without being consumed by it. You practice observing your thoughts and emotions with a quality of interested detachment. You notice what arises without immediately identifying with it or acting from it. Over time, this practice creates a genuine shift in your relationship with your own inner experience. The thoughts become less compelling, the emotions become less commanding. The space between stimulus and response, that crucial space where choice lives, becomes wider and more accessible. Equanimity doesn't make you less passionate or less engaged. It makes you more so, because you can be fully present with the full intensity of experience without needing to manage or escape it. Chapter 11, Advanced Social Intelligence. Understanding the hidden language. Every room you walk into has 2 conversations happening simultaneously. There's the surface conversation, the words being spoken, the topics being discussed, the explicit content of what people are saying. Most people participate only in this conversation, taking words at face value, responding to content, navigating the explicit. Then there's the hidden conversation, the one beneath the surface, happening through body language and microexpressions, through who speaks and who listens, through the invisible currents of need, status, fear, and desire that run under every human interaction. Advanced social intelligence is the ability to read and navigate both conversations simultaneously, to understand not just what people are saying, but what they're actually communicating, not just what's happening in the room, but why it's happening and what's driving it. When you develop this level of social perception, 2 things change dramatically. First, you stop misreading situations. Stop taking things personally that weren't personal. Stop missing signals that were clearly there. Stop being confused by behavior that makes complete sense once you understand the underlying motivation. Second, you become far more effective at influencing outcomes because you understand what people actually need, not just what they say they need. The 4 universal human needs, human behavior across cultures and contexts and personality types, is organized around a relatively small set of fundamental psychological needs. Understanding these needs allows you to decode behavior that would otherwise seem random or confusing. The need for significance. Every person you encounter wants to feel that they matter, that their presence is noticed, their contribution valued, their perspective worthy of consideration. This need is extraordinarily powerful. People will sometimes act in ways that seem irrational or self-defeating, specifically because those actions make them feel significant. When you understand this need, interactions that previously confused you start making sense. The colleague who interrupts constantly isn't trying to be difficult. They're trying to feel included. The person who argues aggressively about a minor point isn't invested in the point. They're invested in being taken seriously. The friend who dominates conversations isn't uninterested in you. They're reaching for a feeling of significance they don't quite have access to. And more practically, when you make people feel genuinely significant, when you notice them, acknowledge their contribution, take their perspective seriously, they respond with warmth, openness, and trust that makes every interaction more productive. The need for certainty. Human beings are fundamentally unsettled by ambiguity. We need to feel that we understand what's happening and what's likely to happen next. When certainty is threatened by change, by conflicting information, by unclear expectations, people become anxious and often defensive. You can leverage this need by becoming a source of clarity in environments where others feel confused. When you can calmly organize complexity, articulate what's uncertain and what isn't, and provide clear direction even in ambiguous situations, people naturally orient toward you. Not because you have all the answers, but because your calm certainty about your ability to navigate uncertainty is itself reassuring. The need for connection. People need to feel genuinely understood and accepted, not just tolerated, but seen. This need drives an enormous amount of social behavior, including many behaviors that seem counterproductive on the surface. The most direct path to creating genuine connection is deep listening, the kind that goes beyond waiting for your turn to speak, into genuinely trying to understand the other person's experience from the inside. When people feel truly heard, they experience an almost immediate relaxation of their social defenses. They become more open, more honest, more collaborative. Mirroring, subtly matching someone's communication style, energy level, and emotional register, accelerates this process, not as a manipulation technique, but as a genuine signal of attunement. You're communicating non-verbally, I'm with you, I'm tracking what you're experiencing. The need for growth and contribution. People need to feel that they're developing and that they're making a meaningful difference to something beyond themselves. When this need is met, people are energized and engaged. When it's chronically unmet, they become restless, disengaged, or quietly resentful. When you position yourself as someone who genuinely facilitates others' growth, who challenges people in ways that expand them, who creates genuine opportunities for meaningful contribution, who invests in others' development not as a strategy, but as an authentic expression of care, you become extraordinarily valuable to the people around you. This cannot be faked effectively. People can sense the difference between genuine interest in their development and instrumental interest in what they can provide. But when the care is real, the influence it creates is profound and lasting. Reading Social Proof and Authority. Two additional dynamics shape human social behavior with particular consistency. Social proof is the tendency to use other people's behavior as information about what the correct or appropriate behavior is. In ambiguous situations, and most social situations carry some ambiguity, people look around at what others are doing and calibrate their own behavior accordingly. Understanding social proof means understanding that your credibility and influence are partly a function of who else endorses you, not through explicit self-promotion, but through the visible associations and relationships that signal your standing. When respected people seek your opinion, include you in important conversations, and publicly value your contribution, others take note and adjust their assessment of you accordingly. Authority operates through a different but related mechanism. People are predisposed to defer to perceived expertise and competence, but authority is not monolithic. It comes in different forms that require different approaches to build. Expert authority comes from demonstrated knowledge and skill in a relevant domain. It's built through consistent, visible competence, through showing, not telling, that you know what you're doing. Moral authority comes from integrity, from being someone whose words and actions consistently align, who does what they say they'll do, who treats people with consistent fairness and honesty. This form of authority is perhaps the most durable because it doesn't depend on any external credential. When expert authority and moral authority are combined in a single person, the result is a quality of trust that opens extraordinary levels of influence. People don't just follow the direction you point. They genuinely want to follow it because they trust both your competence and your character. Build both consistently over time and protect both as the valuable assets they are. Chapter 12, Momentum Mastery, Building Unstoppable. Forward motion. Confidence without momentum is a feeling. Confidence with momentum is a force. The difference between people who sustain extraordinary progress over time and people who cycle endlessly between bursts of motivation and extended periods of stagnation is not talent, intelligence, or even discipline in the conventional sense. It's momentum. Momentum is what happens when your actions start reinforcing each other. When each positive choice makes the next positive choice slightly easier. When each small success builds the expectation of further success. When your identity as someone who follows through becomes so established that not following through starts to feel genuinely strange. Once momentum is genuinely established, it becomes largely self-sustaining. Progress creates confidence. Confidence creates action. Action creates progress. The cycle feeds itself, and the only thing that can interrupt it is a sustained period of inaction. Understanding this changes your entire approach to building confidence and capability. The goal is no longer to feel motivated enough to act. The goal is to act consistently enough that motivation becomes unnecessary. The psychology of consistency. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine running 24 hours a day, constantly updating its model of who you are and what you're capable of, based on your actual behavior. Every time you follow through on a commitment to yourself, every time you do what you said you would do, no matter how small, you add a data point to the case that you are someone who follows through. Your brain begins to build a self-concept around reliability, around capability, around the quiet confidence of knowing that when you decide to do something, you actually do it. Every time you break a commitment to yourself, every time you negotiate with your own standards, give in to the easier option, start something, and abandon it. You add a data point to a different case, and that case accumulates. The critical insight is that the size of the action matters far less than its consistency. A small action done every single day without exception builds stronger momentum and a stronger identity than a large action done sporadically. This is why the most effective approach to building momentum is through what researchers call marginal gains, small sustainable improvements compounded over time. Instead of a 2-hour workout regime, you'll maintain for 11 days before the exhaustion of it defeats you. You commit to 20 minutes every day, and you don't miss. Instead of reading 50 pages a night that becomes a burden you eventually resent, you read 10 pages every night, and you don't miss. Instead of completely overhauling your approach to communication overnight, you practice one specific skill each week, and you don't miss. These commitments feel almost embarrassingly modest. That's the point. Their power is not in their size. Their power is in their certainty. You will actually do them every time. And every time you do, you build the identity and the momentum that makes the next level of commitment feel natural. 10 pages a night is 3,600 pages a year. That's 12 to 15 books. The compound interest on small, consistent actions is staggering. Building positive feedback loops. The architecture of lasting momentum is positive feedback loops. Self-reinforcing cycles where positive actions create positive outcomes that motivate further positive actions. Learning something genuinely new every day makes you more knowledgeable. Being more knowledgeable makes you more confident in conversations and decisions. Being more confident makes you more willing to take on challenges. Taking on challenges creates new learning opportunities. The cycle feeds itself and accelerates. The strategic move is to identify activities that create multiple benefits simultaneously and prioritize those above activities that produce only single benefits. Exercise improves physical health, mental clarity, emotional resilience, sleep quality, and self-confidence simultaneously. Meaningful conversation deepens relationships, sharpens thinking, expands perspective, and creates the feeling of genuine connection. Deliberate skill development in your core professional area improves performance, increases credibility, deepens expertise, and creates tangible evidence of your growing capability. When you invest your time and energy in activities that pay dividends across multiple dimensions of your life, you get compound returns. Each action improves your capacity to benefit from the next action. Progress accelerates not because you're working harder, but because you're working on things that reinforce each other. Energy management, overtime management. The most common approach to building momentum is time management. Organizing your schedule more efficiently, protecting your hours more carefully, squeezing more productive activity into each day. This approach, applied without the complementary discipline of energy management, leads to a specific kind of burnout. You've optimized your schedule but neglected your fuel supply. You have time allocated for everything important and no genuine energy to bring to any of it. Your energy is not a single resource. It's a portfolio of resources, physical, mental, emotional, and creative, each with its own rhythms, each with its own recovery requirements, each at its highest quality at specific times and depleted by specific activities. Physical energy is governed by sleep, nutrition, movement, and recovery. It's the foundation everything else rests on. When it's compromised, every other form of energy is diminished. Mental energy peaks at different times for different people, but almost universally, the highest quality cognitive work happens in the first few hours of the day, before the accumulated decisions and interactions of daily life have depleted the prefrontal cortex's resources. Emotional energy is governed by the quality of your relationships, the alignment between your activities and your values, and the extent to which you're giving more than you're receiving, or receiving more than you're able to process. Creative energy is renewed by unstructured time, novel experiences, genuine rest, and the kind of unhurried reflection that modern life systematically eliminates. Building momentum requires managing all four of these resources, understanding when each is most available, protecting the conditions that renew them, and aligning your most important activities with your highest quality energy states. Work hard, but work with your biology, not against it. Celebrating progress, not just achievement. The final piece of momentum mastery is perhaps the simplest and the most consistently overlooked. Most people only acknowledge themselves when they reach a major milestone, the promotion, the finished project, the significant weight loss, the achieved goal. Until that milestone arrives, it's heads down, effort sustained purely through willpower, with no positive reinforcement for the daily actions that make the milestone possible. This approach starves your motivational system at exactly the moment it needs nourishment. Your brain runs on feedback. It uses the emotional signals attached to your behaviors to decide whether to repeat those behaviors or avoid them. When positive actions consistently produce positive emotional responses, even small ones, your brain files those actions as worth repeating. When positive actions consistently produce no emotional response, when you simply check the box and move on, your brain begins to experience those actions as neutral at best. They don't feel rewarding. They start to feel like obligations. And sustained motivation built on obligation alone is chronically vulnerable to the first difficult week. Learn to genuinely acknowledge your own follow-through, not with elaborate celebration, but with honest internal recognition. I said I would do this, and I did it. Let that land. Feel the small satisfaction of it. Let your brain file it as evidence that you are someone who follows through. This isn't about being easy on yourself. It's about fueling the engine that keeps you moving. Chapter 13. Fear Alchemy, Turning Terror into Your Greatest Fuel. Let's talk about the thing nobody wants to admit. You're afraid, not of something small, not of something abstract. Afraid of the specific, personal, deeply important things, the conversation you keep postponing, the opportunity you keep talking yourself out of, the version of yourself you catch glimpses of sometimes and then immediately retreat from, because wanting it that much feels dangerous. That fear is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't, but I am going to tell you that you've been fundamentally misunderstanding what it means, and that misunderstanding has been costing you more than you realize. Here's what most people do with fear. They treat it as a stop sign, an authoritative signal from somewhere deep in their psychology that says, not this, not yet, not you. They wait for it to subside before they move. They interpret its presence as evidence of unreadiness. They spend enormous energy managing it, suppressing it, negotiating with it, hoping that one day they'll wake up and it will simply be gone. That day doesn't come, and the waiting accumulates into years. Here's what fear actually is. Fear is information. When you feel genuine fear about something, it's almost always because that thing genuinely matters to you. The depth of the fear is a rough measure of the depth of the caring. The things that terrify you most are almost universally the things that would have the greatest positive impact on your life if you move toward them rather than away. Fear is pointing at your greatest opportunities disguised as a warning. Fear is energy. The physiological experience of fear, the elevated heart rate, the heightened alertness, the surge of adrenaline, is not inherently negative. It's activation. It's your system mobilizing resources. That same physiological state, channeled deliberately, is what athletes call being in state. It's what performers call being alive, on stage. The energy of fear and the energy of peak performance are not opposites. They're the same resource, directed differently. Fear is a compass. It reliably points toward the edges of your comfort zone. And everything genuinely worth having in your life exists just beyond those edges. If you could achieve it from within your current comfort zone, you would already have it. Fear is the sensation of approaching the boundary between who you are now and who you're capable of becoming. When you understand fear this way, as information, energy, and compass rather than obstacle, your entire relationship with it shifts. You stop trying to eliminate it. You start learning to work with it. The alchemy process. Step 1. Reframe the sensation. The physiological experience of fear and excitement are, as we've established, nearly identical. The story you attach to those sensations is a choice, and it's a choice you can make deliberately. When the familiar activation arrives before something that matters, heart rate climbing, attention sharpening, energy rising, you practice the conscious reframe. I'm not scared, I'm ready. Not as a denial of the feeling, but as an accurate reinterpretation of what that feeling actually is. This takes practice. The automatic interpretation, this means danger, this means stop, is deeply conditioned. But with consistent repetition, the new interpretation becomes increasingly automatic. Eventually, the activation itself becomes a signal you welcome, because you've learned through repeated experience that it precedes your best performances. Step 2. Use the focus. Fear narrows attention. Most people experience this narrowing as tunnel vision, a loss of perspective that feels disorienting and counterproductive. But that concentrated attention is a resource. Instead of fighting the narrowing, you direct it deliberately. You ask, given that I'm fully activated right now, where does this energy need to go? And then you send it there, into your preparation, into your presence, into the specific action that moves you forward. Fear becomes a focusing mechanism rather than a distraction. Step 3. Find the purpose larger than your comfort. Fear is most powerful when you're primarily focused on yourself, your safety, your image, your comfort, your potential embarrassment. When you're the center of the equation, self-protection becomes the dominant motivation. When you connect with something larger than yourself, a person you're trying to help, a contribution you're trying to make, a value you're genuinely committed to expressing, the calculus shifts. Your discomfort becomes less important than the thing you're serving. You find yourself willing to face the fear because something that matters more than your comfort is at stake. This is not about suppressing your own needs. It's about finding a purpose that makes courage feel less like a sacrifice and more like an obvious choice. Chapter 14, The Confidence Hierarchy. Understanding where you stand and how to rise. Every environment you inhabit has an invisible structure, not the formal hierarchy of titles and org charts, though that exists too. I mean the real hierarchy, the one that determines who people actually listen to, who they seek out when things get difficult, who they think of when something important needs doing. This hierarchy is not determined by seniority or credentials or salary. It's determined by something far more dynamic and far more within your control: perceived value. The people at the top of any real social hierarchy are there because others consistently experience them as bringing something genuinely valuable: clarity, capability, reliability, inspiration, wisdom, creative contribution. Whatever the specific currency of value in that environment, those at the top are reliably providing it. Understanding this reframes the entire project of building confidence in social environments. You're not trying to perform status. You're not trying to project authority. You're trying to become genuinely, observably, consistently valuable, and then letting the hierarchy reflect that reality, rather than trying to force the reflection before the reality exists. The 5 levels. Level 1, genuine competence. This is the entry point. Everything else is built on it. Before you can lead, before you can influence, before you can shift rooms with your presence, you need to be actually good at something that matters in your context. The key word is actually, not somewhat capable, not aspirationally developing, genuinely, demonstrably, observably skilled in ways that other people can verify through direct experience. This requires a commitment to craft that most people are unwilling to make. The kind of sustained, patient, deliberate practice that builds real expertise rather than the appearance of it. It requires feedback, discomfort, failure, iteration, and more time than feels comfortable. But without it, everything above is performance. And performance, as we've established, has an expiration date. Level 2, authentic confidence. Genuine competence creates the conditions for authentic confidence, but doesn't automatically produce it. Plenty of deeply capable people are crippled by self-doubt and undersell their capabilities consistently. Authentic confidence is the ability to present your genuine capability clearly, without apology and without inflation. To say what you know with the certainty you actually have. To disagree when you genuinely disagree. To hold a position under pressure when the position is sound. It develops through the accumulation of experiences where you acted from genuine certainty and it worked, where your judgment proved reliable, where your capability held under real conditions. This is why the competence must come first. Confidence built on real competence doesn't need to perform. It simply is. Level 3, social intelligence. This is where technically excellent people most often get stuck. Social intelligence is the ability to read what's actually happening in human environments, the underlying needs, the invisible dynamics, the real motivations beneath the stated ones, and respond to that reality rather than just its surface. Without it, you can have genuine competence and authentic confidence, and still find that your influence doesn't extend far beyond your immediate technical domain. Because influence in complex human environments requires understanding those environments accurately, and most technical excellence is developed in contexts that don't reward social perception. Developing social intelligence requires a sustained shift in attention from yourself to others, from content to dynamics, from what's being said to what's actually being communicated. It requires genuine curiosity about people as complex, layered beings rather than just as variables in your environment. Level 4. Leadership capacity. Leadership, at its core, is not about authority. It's about the ability to create conditions where other people can do their best work and to move groups toward outcomes that matter. This capacity emerges naturally from the first 3 levels, but requires additional qualities. The willingness to take genuine responsibility for outcomes you don't fully control. The ability to maintain direction and optimism when circumstances are genuinely difficult, and the integrity to make hard decisions in ways that your team can ultimately trust even when they disagree. People follow those who demonstrate this capacity not because they have to, but because they want to, because the person at the front has proven through consistent behavior that they're genuinely oriented toward the group's well-being and not just their own advancement. Level 5. Presence. This is the layer that integrates everything beneath it and adds something that cannot be manufactured through any specific technique. True presence, the kind that walks into a room and shifts its energy, that speaks and creates silence because people genuinely want to hear what comes next, that inspires trust before it's earned through any specific demonstration, emerges from the deep integration of competence, confidence, social intelligence, and leadership, held together by genuine self-knowledge and authentic care for others. It cannot be faked. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be acquired through any shortcut. It is built slowly through sustained commitment to doing the real work at every level beneath it. And when it arrives not as something you put on, but as something you finally stop hiding. Chapter 15. The complete transformation, becoming unrecognizably confident. Here's what nobody tells you about genuine transformation. It doesn't announce itself. There's no single moment where you look in the mirror and see a different person staring back. There's no dramatic turning point where insecurity gives way to confidence in a clean, cinematic transition. There's no graduation ceremony. What actually happens is quieter, and in some ways, more profound. You start noticing gradually that you're doing things your previous self would have found impossible, not because you finally feel ready, but because you stopped waiting to feel ready. You speak up in the room where you used to stay silent. You pursue the opportunity your previous self would have talked yourself out of. You have the conversation you spent months postponing. You ask for what you want directly, without the elaborate setup designed to soften the potential rejection. And then, at some point, you notice something stranger still. You stop noticing. The thing that required courage last year is just what you do now. The conversation that would have kept you awake the night before is just a conversation. The room that would have activated your threat. Response is just a room full of people. Confidence has stopped being something you're working on. It's become something you simply are. This is what complete transformation actually looks like. Not a dramatic reinvention, a quiet becoming. What changes the psychological shift is the deepest. Your internal dialogue changes not to relentless positivity, but to something more valuable, accuracy. You see yourself clearly without the distortion of shame or its grandiosity. You know what you're genuinely capable of. You know what you're still developing. You hold both without drama. Your relationship with failure transforms completely. Setbacks that would once have sent you spiraling for days are now processed in hours, extracted for their information, released from their weight, integrated into an ever-growing body of evidence about what you're capable of surviving and learning from. Your relationship with other people's opinions changes in a way that initially surprises you. You don't stop caring what people think. That would be sociopathic, not confident. But you become discriminating about whose opinion carries weight. The people who know you, who are invested in your growth, who have the standing to assess what they're assessing. Their feedback genuinely matters to you. Everyone else is just noise in a channel you've learned to mostly tune out. Behaviorally, you become decisive in ways that used to feel risky. You make decisions from your own judgment and then adjust based on what you learn, rather than endlessly deferring decisions until external permission arrives. You set boundaries not as dramatic stands, but as quiet, matter-of-fact expressions of what you will and won't accept. You ask for what you want without the performance of not quite asking. Socially, your circle reorganizes. This part can be uncomfortable. Some relationships don't survive your growth because they were calibrated to your previous level of confidence and don't know how to recalibrate. But new relationships arrive that match the person you're becoming. People who operate from genuine security, genuine ambition, genuine care. The quality of connection in your life rises. What remains the same? And here's what I want you to understand, perhaps more than anything else in this entire framework. Dangerous confidence does not make you less human. It does not make fear disappear. It does not make difficult things stop being difficult. It does not make uncertainty comfortable. What it does is change your relationship with all of those things. Fear becomes information you can work with rather than a wall you can't get past. Difficult conversations become things you navigate rather than things you avoid. Uncertainty becomes a condition you operate within rather than a condition that prevents you from operating. You still feel deeply, sometimes painfully, always authentically. The difference is that your feelings no longer have veto power over your actions. They're inputs, not instructions. The responsibility that comes with it. The final thing I'll say is this. Dangerous confidence, fully developed, is a significant force. It changes rooms. It influences people. It opens doors and creates possibilities that weren't available before. That force carries responsibility. The most confident person in any room has a choice about what to do with their confidence, whether to use it to elevate the people around them or to diminish them, whether to open doors for others or simply walk through them alone, whether to build something that matters beyond their own advancement or to optimize entirely for personal gain. True dangerous confidence, the kind that lasts, the kind that deepens rather than hollowing out over time, the kind that you can look back on without regret, is always paired with genuine care for others. Not as a performance of virtue, but because when you are genuinely secure in yourself, other people's flourishing stops feeling like a threat. It starts feeling like the point. The most dangerous thing you can become is someone who is fully confident, deeply capable, and genuinely committed to making things better. In every room you enter, every conversation you have, every life you touch. That's the transformation this framework is pointing you toward. not the person who walks into rooms and takes, the person who walks into rooms and changes them. That person is already inside you. This has been the work of letting them out.